How to play Settlers of Catan. Catan is a fun game for 3 or 4 players, ages 10 and up, and each game runs about 90 minutes long. What's unique about Settlers of Catan is that the board setup creates a different experience every time you play. You'll begin by connecting the outer edges of the board like a jigsaw puzzle. They've made it easy by including numbers where the pieces connect, so you know what order to put them in. Next, you'll fill the center with hexes placed randomly. Then put a number in the center of every hex except for the desert. When placing the numbers, be careful not to put 2 red ones next to each other. Each hex in the game represents a resource. You have brick, wood, ore, sheep, and wheat. And then there's the desert, which does not produce a resource at all. Off to the side, you'll have the largest army card and the longest road card. Then each player will get their building cost card that corresponds to the color they're playing. And the robber gets placed on the desert. To begin the game, the first player will put a settlement on the corner of one of the hexes. It can go on any corner, but it can't go in the middle of a hex. Now that player will place a road next to the settlement in any of the 3 directions. Roads can't just be placed randomly anywhere. They have to touch a settlement that you own, another road that you own, or a city that you own. So the first player places their settlement, and then the road next to the settlement. Then the second player goes. They'll place their first settlement and their first road. You're not allowed to place a settlement on a corner adjacent to another settlement like this. It always has to be at least 2 corners away. You'll go clockwise around the table, allowing each player to place 1 settlement and 1 road. Then you'll reverse the order to counterclockwise, having the last person place a second settlement, second road, all the way back to the first person again. And now you're ready to start the game. Player 1 rolls the dice, and whatever number they roll will produce resources. In this case, it's 10. So every player who has a number 10 touching one of their settlements will gain that resource. In this example, the red player gets 1 wood, and the orange player gets 1 brick. Okay. Ultimately, you're trying to collect enough resources to build items to put on the board, which will get you points, and I'll explain that later. But a wood and a brick will get you a road, a wood, a brick, a wheat, and a sheep will get you a settlement, 2 wheat and 3 ore get you a city, and then a wheat, a sheep, and an ore get you a development card. There are 3 phases to every turn. Phase 1 is collecting resources, which we've already discussed. Phase 2 is trading. When it's your turn, you can choose to trade resource cards with any other player. Of course, both players have to agree to the trade for it to happen. You could also choose to trade directly with the bank. In this case, you'd have to have 4 of the same resource card in exchange for any 1 other resource card. If you happen to have a settlement or a city on one of the harbors, you'll get a better exchange rate. If you have the 3-for-1 trading port, you can trade any 3 of the same card for any 1 other card with the bank. If you have one of the resource-specific harbors, you could trade 2-for-1 with the bank, but it has to be 2 of that specific resource for any other resource. In the 3rd phase of your turn, the buy-build phase, you can buy a development card, or you could build a city, a road, or settlement. There's no limit to how many things you can build as long as you have enough cards to build them. Now it's player 2's turn. They roll the dice and get a 5. In this scenario, nobody has a settlement on a 5, so nobody gets any resources this turn. The players will continue to roll the dice, collect resources, and trade cards until somebody has enough resources to buy something. In this case, the player is going to buy a road by returning a brick and a wood to the bank, and then placing a road on the board next to one of their other roads, or next to one of their settlements or cities. If a player purchases a settlement, as mentioned earlier, it has to be placed at least 2 spots away from something else that they own, and it has to be connected by roads. If a player purchases a city, it has to replace a current settlement that they already own. That spot now produces double the resources that it did before. When a player rolls a 7, they get to move the robber onto any hex on the board, and that hex will no longer produce resources when its number is rolled. That player also gets to steal 1 card at random from somebody who owns a settlement or a city touching the hex that they put the robber on. If a player purchases a development card, it goes into their hand but they cannot play it on the same turn that it's purchased. There's no limit to the number of development cards a player can purchase, but they can only play one per turn. The first player to get to 10 points wins the game, and there's a few different ways to get points. Every settlement placed on the board is worth 1 point. Every city is worth 2 points. Some development cards are worth 1 victory point, and they remain hidden until you get to 10 points. Another type of development card is called a knight, and the first player to play 3 knights gets the largest army card, which is worth 2 points. Don't get too comfortable though, because if another player ends up playing 4 knights, then they get the largest army card. The first player to place 5 consecutive roads earns the longest road card, which is worth 2 points. If the roads are not in consecutive order, it does not count though. And if another player ends up placing 1 more road than you, then they get the longest road card. And that's how you play Settlers of Catan. Please leave a comment below to let us know what you think.